In 1922, a director was found shot in the back in his own home. The studio fixers got there before the police. They destroyed evidence and created fake stories. This wasn't unusual. This was normal in old Hollywood. Stars married 16-year-olds to avoid jail time. They forced teenagers into disturbing acts. Studios paid millions to silence victims. The truth stayed buried for 50 years, until deathbed confessions and hidden memoirs finally exposed Hollywood's darkest secrets. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn was the king of Hollywood adventure. With his slick smile, perfect hair, and sword always in hand, he ruled the 1930s and 40s. Films like Captain Blood, The Sea Hawk, and The Adventures of Robin Hood made him a global icon. Women adored him. Men wanted to be him. He was fearless on screen and reckless off it. But while the cameras showed a hero, the headlines told a very different story. In late 1942, Flynn was arrested, not for a bar fight or some drunken mess, but for something far worse. He was accused of statutory rape. Two teenage girls, Betty Hansen and Peggy Satterley, came forward. Betty was 17, Peggy was just 15. They said Flynn used his fame and charm to trap them. One claimed he assaulted her after a Hollywood party. The other said he took advantage of her twice on his yacht after giving her alcohol. The trial started in January 1943. Women under 21 weren't even allowed inside the courtroom because the testimony was considered too graphic. A medical team was on standby in case fans fainted. Flynn was 33. He sat in court, calm and confident, even as the girls described terrifying encounters. Peggy said his attack was so brutal she thought she might die. Betty said he locked her in a room and forced himself on her after plying her with drinks. But Flynn wasn't going down without a fight. His lawyer, Jerry Geisler, was one of the best, and brutal. He tore apart the girls' reputations. He claimed they lied about their ages, chased fame, and were only out for money. He even brought a broken door into the courtroom to prove Flynn couldn't have locked Betty in. They said Peggy used fake IDs to get into clubs, making her look older than she was. The defense didn't just defend Flynn, they attacked the girls hard. Flynn didn't shy away from the spotlight either. He smiled at the jury, flirted with female jurors, winked at the crowd. He never once admitted guilt. He said none of it happened. Meanwhile, the jury, 9 women and 3 men, had their names and photos splashed across newspapers. They were under massive pressure. Hollywood was watching. The world was watching. After 21 days of explosive testimony and 24 hours of tense deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Flynn walked free. The courtroom erupted. Women in the crowd swarmed him, screaming, crying, even tearing off buttons from his coat as souvenirs. From that day on, the phrase, "in like Flynn," became a part of American slang, meaning you could charm your way into anything, even the worst situations. Rosco Arbuckle. Rosco "Fatty" Arbuckle was one of the biggest stars in early Hollywood, and not just because he weighed 266 pounds. In 1921, he signed a $1 million deal with Paramount. That's over $16 million today. At the time, no actor in Hollywood was paid more. His face was everywhere. His comedy lit up silent screens. And he was in the same league as Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, who were also his close friends. But everything changed over one weekend. It was Labor Day, 1921. Arbuckle was in San Francisco hosting a wild party at the St. Francis Hotel. Among the guests was a 30-year-old actress named Virginia Raft. At some point during the celebration, something went horribly wrong. Raft became violently ill in Arbuckle's hotel suite. A doctor came in, thought it was just alcohol, and gave her morphine. But her condition got worse. She was taken to the hospital, and 4 days later, she died. The cause? a ruptured bladder that led to peritonitis. It was said she already had bladder problems, made worse by alcohol. But the truth didn't matter. Not anymore. Virginia hadn't gone to the party alone. Her friend, Bambina Maud Delmont, came forward with a shocking claim. She accused Arbuckle of raping Virginia and crushing her with his weight. The press jumped on the story like vultures, and once William Randolph Hearst's newspapers got involved, the headlines exploded. They printed every dirty rumor they could find. First, it was just an assault. Then, they said he used a Coca-Cola bottle. Or was it champagne? The story kept changing, but the public didn't care. They were hooked. There was no evidence of rape. Doctors found nothing. Later, it came out that Delmont had tried to blackmail Arbuckle. But by then, it was too late. The outrage had already taken hold. Police arrested Arbuckle and charged him with murder. The charge was later reduced to manslaughter. He went to trial 3 times. The first 2 trials ended with hung juries, but the third was different. The jury came back in just 5 minutes. Not only did they find him innocent, they apologized. In their words, Arbuckle had suffered a great injustice, but the apology didn't fix what came next. Even though he was cleared, Arbuckle's films were pulled from theaters. The studios didn't want his name anywhere near their movies. He couldn't get hired. He had to work under fake names just to keep going. Even his friends, Chaplin, Keaton, couldn't protect him from the fear that now controlled Hollywood. What happened to Arbuckle changed the entire movie industry. Churches and moral reformers used his case as proof that Hollywood was rotten. They called for action, and Hollywood gave it to them. In 1922, the studios created a new organization to clean up their image. It was called the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors Association. They hired a man named Will Hayes to lead it. And just like that, the rules changed. What you could show on screen, what characters could say, even how they kissed. Everything was censored. This system, known as the Hayes Code, would shape movies for decades, and it all started with one party in one hotel room. Arbuckle's name was never the same. His career never fully recovered. He died in 1933, just 12 years after the scandal. Some say he died of a heart attack. Others say it was a broken spirit. Either way, he became the first casualty in Hollywood's long war between fame and scandal. William Desmond Taylor. William Desmond Taylor was one of the biggest names in silent film. He directed hits like Tom Sawyer in 1917 and Huckleberry Finn in 1920. People admired him not just for his work, but for the way he brought out deep emotions from stars like Mary Miles Minter and Mabel Normand. But the man behind the camera wasn't who he appeared to be. He had a double life. And when he was found dead, shot in the back in his own home, it set off one of the darkest and most tangled scandals Hollywood has ever seen. On the morning of February 2, 1922, Taylor's valet, Henry Peavy, walked into the director's bungalow in Los Angeles and found his employer lying dead on the floor. There were no signs of a robbery, but something was off from the very beginning. The crime scene was quickly overrun, not just by police or neighbors, but by studio fixers. They had one job: protect the image of Hollywood, and they wasted no time interfering, possibly even moving or removing evidence before anyone could ask questions. Then the real chaos began. Inside Taylor's home, police found letters from Mary Miles Minter, a teen actress who was just 18 years old. She had been in love with Taylor, who was nearly 50. The letters were intense. One of them read, "I want to go away with you, up in the hills, anywhere, just so we can be alone. I would awake and find 2 strong arms around me and 2 dear lips pressed to mine in a long, sweet kiss." The public was shocked. The age gap, the passion, the secrecy. Suddenly, The story was no longer about a murder. It was about a forbidden romance, a starlet, and the secrets she shared with a man twice her age. But Taylor himself had secrets, too. He was born William Cunningham Dean Tanner in Ireland. He had a wife and a daughter in New York. One day in 1908, he simply vanished. No explanation. Years later, he showed up in Hollywood as someone new. William Desmond Taylor. Nobody knew the truth until after he died. In 1921, someone broke into his home. After that, he started getting threatening messages. People who knew about his past, who called him by his old name. It became clear he was being blackmailed. And there was another layer to all this. Taylor had been quietly helping authorities crack down on drug dealers. Some of those dealers were connected to the Hollywood scene. One of his closest friends, Mabel Normand, had a drug problem. She had even visited Taylor the night before he was killed. So some believed a dealer wanted him silenced. Others thought it was jealousy or revenge. Either way, someone had something to lose if Taylor kept talking. The investigation turned into a circus. The district attorney, Thomas Woolwine, was already known for being corrupt. Instead of following real leads, he focused on Mabel Normand. She made headlines, and headlines kept the public distracted. At the same time, another name kept coming up: Charlotte Shelby, Mary Miles Minter's mother. She was fiercely controlling and had allegedly threatened Taylor. Some said she even paid off people to make sure her name disappeared from the case. Meanwhile, Paramount was panicking. Just months earlier, another of their stars, Fatty Arbuckle, had been caught in a scandal that nearly destroyed the studio. They couldn't afford another disaster, so they started feeding the press wild stories. Affairs with men, anything that would distract from the idea that the studio might be involved in a cover-up. They didn't want people asking questions. They wanted the story to die. But it didn't. It only got worse. Mabel Normand's career collapsed. She went from being the queen of comedy to a public pariah. Her films were banned in several states. Mary Miles Minter, once seen as the next big thing, vanished from the spotlight. And Taylor? His death was never solved. By 1940, almost all the files and evidence had disappeared. Then came one final twist. In 1964, an aging actress named Margaret Gibson was on her deathbed. She had lived a life full of scandal and mystery herself. And as she lay dying, she reportedly confessed to killing William Desmond Taylor. But no one could prove it. Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin made the world laugh without saying a single word. But behind that bowler hat and those floppy shoes was a man caught in scandal, obsession, exile, and some of the darkest secrets in early Hollywood. In 1918, at just 29 years old, Chaplin married 16-year-old Mildred Harris. She claimed she was pregnant. She wasn't. But soon after, she actually did give birth to Chaplin's first son. The baby died just 3 days later. The marriage, like many things in Chaplin's life, fell apart quickly. By 1920, it was over. Then came Lita Grey. She had acted in The Kid when she was just 8. Chaplin didn't look at her that way until she turned 16. He was 35. When she became pregnant, Chaplin didn't just risk bad headlines, he risked jail time. Statutory rape in California was serious, so he fled with her to Mexico. They got married in secret in 1924. But things didn't stay quiet for long. Lita later accused Chaplin of emotional abuse and of forcing her into disturbing sexual acts. The divorce became one of the biggest scandals in Hollywood. It cost him $600,000, a record at the time. But the money wasn't the worst part. His image took a beating. The man who made the world smile was now being painted as a predator. And yet, the worst was still to come. In the early 1940s, Chaplin, now in his 50s, started a relationship with a 21-year-old actress named Joan Berry. It ended badly, very badly. She later claimed he had fathered her child. Chaplin said no. Blood tests proved he wasn't the father. But in a bizarre twist, the court didn't care. The law didn't recognize the test results. The jury ruled against Chaplin. He was forced to pay child support for a child that wasn't his. It wasn't just a legal disaster, it was political too. Chaplin had already made enemies. His left-wing views had caught the attention of the FBI and anti-communist politicians. Now, with this scandal fresh in the headlines, they pounced. In 1952, Chaplin boarded a ship to London for the premiere of Limelight. While he was gone, the US government revoked his re-entry visa. They didn't want him back. Officially, it was about morals and politics. But everyone knew the truth. The scandals had finally caught up with him. Chaplin spent the rest of his life in Switzerland. He returned to America only once to accept an honorary Oscar in 1972. Wallace Berry. Wallace Berry looked like everyone's favorite uncle. Big, gruff, with a heart of gold, or so the audience believed. In reality, he was one of the most feared men on a Hollywood set. He won an Oscar in 1932 for The Champ. But he didn't actually win. Frederick March had more votes. MGM's powerful boss, Louis B. Mayer, forced the Academy to declare it a tie. Why? Because Berry was the studio's biggest star, and Mayer wasn't going to let anyone else take the spotlight. On camera, Berry played lovable oafs. Off camera, he was a bully. He once slapped 16-year-old Mickey Rooney so hard during a scene that the boy collapsed. It wasn't part of the script. Director Tay Garnett was furious. He warned Berry that next time, a piece of lighting equipment might accidentally fall on his head. Berry didn't just hit people, he stole scenes. Child star Jackie Cooper acted alongside him in 5 films and later said, "I really disliked him. He always made me feel uncomfortable." Cooper said Berry would constantly try to upstage him, even in moments when Cooper was meant to shine. Once the cameras stopped rolling, Berry treated him like an unkempt dog. Margaret O'Brien, another child star, said she only had to hear that Berry was on set to start crying. Jane Powell, who played his daughter in a film, called him her least favorite movie dad. It wasn't just kids. Berry walked off the set of Grand Hotel because he didn't think Joan Crawford could act. He refused to come back until she learned how. Yet, the studios protected him. MGM knew he was a problem, but he made too much money to fire. Howard Strickling, the head of publicity, worked overtime to keep Berry's image clean. And Louis B. Mayer gave him whatever he wanted, including a contract clause that said he'd always earn $1 more than any other actor at the studio. That was Berry in a nutshell. Petty, powerful, and completely untouchable. Kirk Douglas Kirk. Douglas was one of the biggest stars of Hollywood's golden era. He played tough, fearless men on screen, like in Spartacus, The Bad and the Beautiful, and Gunfight at the OK Corral. With his strong looks and powerful performances, people saw him as a hero, both in film and in real life. He helped fight the Hollywood blacklist and stood up for actors who had been silenced. By the time he died in 2020, at 103 years old, his place in film history seemed untouchable. But that changed in November 2021. Lana Wood, the younger sister of actress Natalie Wood, released a memoir that shook Hollywood. In Little Sister, my investigation into the mysterious death of Natalie Wood, she claimed that Kirk Douglas had sexually assaulted Natalie. It allegedly happened in the summer of 1955. At the time, Natalie was only 15 or 16. She had already starred in Miracle on 34th Street and was filming The Searchers. Douglas was in his late 30s and at the peak of his fame. According to Lana, their mother arranged the meeting. She believed Douglas could help Natalie's career. It took place at the Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles, a hotel known for scandal and secrecy. Lana was just 8, waiting in the car with her mother while Natalie went inside alone. When Natalie came back, she looked shaken. Her hair was a mess, her clothes were rumpled, and her face was pale. Lana remembered their mother whispering to Natalie, but she didn't understand what had happened until years later. As adults, Natalie finally told her. "He hurt me, Lana," she said. Natalie described the assault like she wasn't even in her body. She said she was terrified, confused, frozen. Their mother's response was blunt and cold. "Suck it up." The family stayed silent. They were afraid of Kirk Douglas, afraid of what he could do to Natalie's career if they spoke out. For years, rumors swirled. People whispered about something terrible involving a young Natalie and a powerful man. But no one said names. Not until Kirk Douglas passed away. The moment his name was linked to the story, the reaction was explosive. Some were shocked, others weren't. People began to ask how many more stories like this were buried under Hollywood's shiny image. Why had so many stayed quiet for so long? And how many lives were destroyed while the industry protected its stars? Douglas had been seen as a man of principle, someone who stood up against injustice. That's what made the allegations harder for many to process. His son, Michael Douglas, gave only a short reply. May they both rest in peace. But peace was the last thing this story gave anyone. Lana Turner. Lana Turner looked like every man's dream in the 1940s. Blonde, glamorous, dripping in elegance. She was the kind of woman Hollywood was built to worship. She lit up the screen in The Postman Always Rings Twice and earned an Oscar nomination for Peyton Place. But behind those perfect poses and red carpets was a woman living in a world far more dangerous than any film role she played. And in 1958, that world exploded into a real-life murder. She wasn't even supposed to be famous. Lana had just been a teenage girl sipping a soda in a Los Angeles drugstore when a movie scout spotted her. One lucky break, and suddenly, she was on every poster in America. But fame came with shadows. And one of those shadows had a name, Johnny Stompanato. He was charming at first. He called himself John Steele. But he was no actor. He worked for Mickey Cohen, one of the most feared mob bosses in Los Angeles. Lana's friends tried to warn her. Mickey Rooney, who knew him from the underworld, begged her to run. But Lana didn't. She stayed. And soon, she was trapped in a storm of abuse, threats, and fear. Their relationship was a nightmare. Johnny would beat her, scream at her, then apologize and pull her back in. In 1957, she was filming in London when he flew across the Atlantic, stormed the set with a gun, and threatened her co-star, Sean Connery. Connery, still a young actor, wrestled the gun away and got Johnny deported. But the drama didn't end there. Back in Beverly Hills, it got worse. On April 4th, 1958, Good Friday, Johnny showed up again. This time, he wanted money. He was angry. He threatened her with a razor blade. Lana's 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl Crane, saw everything. And in a moment of pure instinct, she grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed Johnny in the stomach. He collapsed and bled out on the floor. Johnny Stompanato was dead. The police arrived. The press followed. And Lana Turner's perfect life shattered in front of millions. The trial was chaos. Lana cried on the witness stand, describing how her daughter had saved her. The public couldn't get enough. Headlines screamed, photographers camped outside, and the jury ruled it a justifiable homicide. Cheryl was free, but not everyone believed the story. Some whispered that Lana had stabbed Johnny herself, that the studio, MGM, had staged the whole thing to protect their golden girl. After all, Turner was worth millions. And the studios didn't just make movies, they made narratives. They covered things up when they had to, even murder. Then came the blackmail rumors. People close to the case said Johnny and his boss, Mickey Cohen, had planned to extort Lana from the beginning. Some claimed Johnny had drugged her, taken compromising photos, and demanded money. Others said he was planning to ruin her career if she didn't pay. Whether true or not, it painted a picture that was hard to forget. Hollywood wasn't just glitz and cameras. It was a war zone behind closed doors. George Raft. George Raft was the face of the Hollywood gangster. He looked like trouble, talked like trouble, and on screen, he made crime look good. In movies like Scarface and Each Dawn I Die, he didn't play mobsters. He was one. Born in 1901 in Hell's Kitchen, George grew up around violence. He was friends with Bugsy Siegel, one of the most feared mobsters in the country. As a young man, George wasn't acting. He was driving for real-life criminals like Oni Madden, who ran Harlem's infamous Cotton Club. He wasn't just a driver. He ran messages. He set up meetings. He was deep in the game. When George made it to Hollywood, the mob came with him. Bugsy Siegel lived in his house for a while. When Siegel was arrested for illegal bookmaking in 1944, George testified in court to help him. It wasn't just loyalty, it was survival. The FBI knew who George was. They questioned him in 1938 and again in 1953. They wanted to know what he knew about guys like Louis Buchalter and Jacob Shapiro, names straight out of the Mafia's blood-soaked directory. In 1942, George was investigated for tax evasion. In 1946, he was sued for assault in Australia. But none of that stopped him. In the 1960s, George helped run the Colony Club in London, a luxury casino backed by Meyer Lansky, another mafia kingpin. When the British government found out, they banned him from the country. But George didn't care. He once said his time in London, riding in a Rolls, living in a Mayfair penthouse, was the happiest time of his life. Back in Hollywood, George wasn't just a star, he was a fixer. When James Cagney was being threatened by mobsters for standing up to them, George stepped in and made the threats disappear. Same with Gary Cooper. George had pull, real pull. But the mob doesn't do retirement plans, and Hollywood has a short memory. By the end, George was out, blacklisted, forgotten, banned from casino jobs, too risky for film, too famous for crime. Vinnie Teresa, a known mob informant, once said George Raft was the best investment Lansky and Cellini made in England. But George died broke. Hollywood forgot his name, and the mob didn't look back. Robert Mitchum. In the late 1940s, Robert Mitchum was at the top of his game. With films like Out of the Past and the story of G.I. Joe, he had become the face of tough guy Hollywood. Cool, quiet, and dangerously charismatic. He was earning $3,000 a week. But on the night of August 31st, 1948, that image shattered. Police raided a small cottage in Laurel Canyon, Los Angeles. It wasn't just any bust. It was a trap, set by officers who had been watching Mitchum for months. They had bugged the place and staked it out for 5 months straight. When they stormed in, Mitchum was found smoking marijuana with actress Lila Leeds and 2 others. The press exploded. Headlines called it a reefer resort. Mitchum knew the weight of it all. He told police, "This is the bitter end of everything. My career, my marriage, everything." His wife, Dorothy, had already separated from him. But when the scandal broke, she returned to LA to stand by him. It didn't help. The White House banned his films. His son got kicked out of private school. His name was suddenly poison in polite circles. But what no one expected was what came next. Mitchum pleaded no contest. The court sentenced him to 60 days. He spent 1 week in county jail and the rest on a prison farm in Castaic, where reporters from Life magazine snapped photos of him milking cows and making cement blocks. Mitchum didn't hide. He made jokes about it, calling jail like Palm Springs without the riffraff. Then, 3 years later, the whole thing collapsed. In 1951, the conviction was overturned when it came out that the entire raid may have been a setup. But the damage had already become something else, something valuable. Instead of ending his career, the scandal gave him a new identity. Mitchum wasn't just an actor anymore. He was a rebel. And Hollywood cashed in. RKO rushed him back onto the screen. His next movie, Rachel and the Stranger, was a hit. Studio boss Howard Hughes was stunned. Mitchum's arrest had made him even more popular. By 1968, teenagers were still voting him the coolest celebrity. Mitchum didn't survive the scandal. He owned it. Marlon Brando changed the way acting looked, sounded, and felt. In A Streetcar Named Desire, On the Waterfront, and The Godfather, he wasn't acting. He was the character. By the 1970s, he had 2 Oscars and a place in film history. But Brando didn't care about awards. On March 27, 1973, he stunned Hollywood by refusing the Best Actor Oscar for The Godfather. Instead, he sent Native American activist Sacheen Littlefeather to the stage. She wore traditional dress and read a statement about Hollywood's treatment of Native Americans. Some applauded, some booed. The moment was electric. It wasn't a stunt. Brando had been arrested for activism back in 1964. He believed every word. He just didn't care if Hollywood agreed. But his defiance didn't stop at the Academy Awards. On set, Brando was known for being difficult, sometimes impossible. During Mutiny on the Bounty in 1962, his constant arguments with directors caused delays and budget chaos. The director was eventually replaced. Brando denied being the cause, but producers weren't buying it. His bad boy reputation got worse when, in 1973, he punched paparazzo Ron Galella and broke his jaw. For every moment of genius on screen, there was a storm off-screen. His personal life was no different. Chaotic, dramatic, and at times tragic. He had at least 11 children, including 3 adopted, but his relationships with them were filled with pain. In 1990, the unthinkable happened. His son, Christian Brando, shot and killed Dag Drolle, the boyfriend of Christian's half-sister Cheyenne, inside Brando's own house. Christian claimed he was protecting Cheyenne from abuse. But the trial revealed years of dysfunction, substance abuse, and emotional neglect. In court, Brando admitted it all. "I failed as a father," he said, calling his own life wasted. The media devoured the story. They documented every ugly detail: custody battles, addiction, violence. For all his brilliance on screen, Brando couldn't hold his own family together. The household was a pressure cooker, and the cracks had finally burst.